Great. I don't think anyone is on Zoom tonight, so I don't think there's any fancy.
You are correct. You are correct.
Great. Thank you so much, voice in the sky.
AI is calling us.
Exactly.
I assure you I am a real person.
That's
For now. For now.
we believe you.
You passed the Turing test. Thanks so much. Can somebody help me figure out who is, why don't we just go around, because I'm a little rough on names, so
Sure.
let's go around and introduce ourselves, and I'll check off attendance and do it that way.
We have a new member.
Oh, and a new member, got it. So why don't we start with you?
I'm Paul Rasmussen. I'm your planning board rep.
Nice. Could you just say a word about, I've seen you forever. Tell me just a little bit about your Durham history and your planning board and
I joined the planning
whether you were
board.
voluntold to come here.
Well, so I joined the planning board in December of 14.
I thought so.
I've made the tour of every committee assignment
Nice.
possible from the
Are we
planning
the
board.
last one?
And
That's
you guys are
hurtful.
the last ones I'm checking off the block.
Best for last.
That's for last, right?
So, I mean, I learned stuff at every committee I joined. So right now I'm running 3 simultaneously, so I'm a little spread out. But
Wow.
Nice. Well, welcome. We appreciate that long history and that context. That's amazing.
Hi, I'm Matt Davis, the UNH rep, faculty in the Earth Sciences Department on the UNH Energy Task Force, and I've been involved with geothermal heat pumps for the past 12, 15 years.
Wonderful.
Mike Lemon?
Clem, got you.
Matthias Dinkarmedia.
Matthias, I mispronounce every time. Great.
That's all right. There's 18 ways to say my
Go
name.
for the Austrian version.
That's fine.
Charlie Forsey, chair, vice chair.
Yeah, sure.
Promoted myself.
Yeah,
Cool.
Andrew Coppins. I'm new to this committee, relatively new to Durham too. We've been here for about 3 years. Newmarket before that. I'm faculty at UNH in the education department, and the most relevant, I guess, energy experience that I have is we built a passive house with my wife and I, and yeah.
Nice. Maybe we'll have a slideshow in the future of all the things you're proud of and all the things you learned.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, long slide.
It's a date.
That would be good, yeah. Thank
Hi, I'm Malcolm Brown, here for the first time in the flesh. This is my second or third meeting. Been in Durham since 2013.
Nice.
Great to be here.
you. I'm Steve Holmgren, also been in Durham since 2013. I'm a retired engineer from AT&T. My energy experience, I guess, is been about 7-year electric vehicle owner. I have installed solar panels on our house when we moved here, and I've been involved with the Energy Committee for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years now. Not sure, something like that.
Great. Great. And I think we have one guest. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself or let us know. I think we have new business and things at the end, but I'd love to hear.
Okay, Stephen Fellows.
Yeah.
Live at Riverwoods,
Nice.
and before that, I lived on Bay Road for about 25 years.
Nice.
I'm mainly here tonight to listen and learn,
Great.
and see if I can offer any of my talents. I like data analysis, I like research. I can be willing to review drafts of any documents you have.
Nice.
I'm not an expert in municipal energy policy, but I am a well-informed layperson on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and greenhouse gas accounting. I have an educational and professional background in electrical engineering. I'm an active member of SAFE, a Riverwoods Sustainability Committee.
Wow.
I'm serving on the Energy Committee of a SAFE, which is a network of senior living facilities throughout the United States. I reviewed the town's climate action plan, greenhouse gas inventories, and the 2023 report assessing Durham's climate change. And additionally, I'm currently reviewing U.S. community protocol to deepen my understanding of emissions at the municipal level. I'm familiar with the GHG protocol for corporate standard, and I've used the Department of Energy's portfolio manager to estimate the carbon footprint of the Riverwoods facility. All of Riverwoods electricity comes from green sources, so I understand how RECs work. In addition, Riverwoods is planning to build a new facility across the street from a current one on Durham Point on what's the name of the road? Stone Quarry Road, and a group of us are trying to get the administration to erect a LEED Gold certified building.
Wow.
And hopefully, we're also advocating for a zero fossil fuel use in the building, and we're advocating also for low embodied carbon in the building.
Wow.
And so, again, I welcome any chance to assist you in any way I can.
Great. And just to make it explicit, are you hoping, is this your visit before trying to join the Energy Committee?
And maybe I'll just see how things go tonight.
See how we do tonight?
That's right,
Great.
that's right,
But
yes.
I can't imagine a better perspective and a more important local tenant with with building and expansion plans in an economy that maybe doesn't have much building going on. So
Sure.
it would be fantastic.
Okay, great. Well,
Welcome, and what a great introduction.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Thank you.
All right, well, we've acknowledged everybody. I'm working through the chair thing. There's approval of the minutes. I think does anyone have any comments on the minutes as circulated?
No comments.
And do we move to approve them?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Right. I think we can just aye vote because we don't have the, so all who approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, the minutes have
I'll
been approved.
abstain. since I wasn't here.
Yep.
That makes perfect sense, thank you. All right, we're through number 2. We're trying to keep up with Mike's 8:30 departure record. I think he got us out at 8:25 his first night. We'll see what we can do. We have administrative items. I believe we've already opened the floor for guests to speak. If you want to sit at the table or join us or talk, it's totally up to you.
You don't mind if I contribute?
I don't mind if you contribute at all. It would be a great trial run. So come as close as you want. And but I'm guessing you read your statement and you've said what you want to say for right now, just
Yes,
as
I have,
introduction.
yes.
Excellent, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome. I believe we do have one open spot.
I think so.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of any
Just one, I think.
firm commitments.
There
so-
are 2? I think it's just one, right?
I think it's one. Great.
They tell us we're supposed to have reserves.
Reserves?
You can have, yeah, you can
I-
alternate.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure if that was even approved by the town council, if that has to be approved by the town council to allow it. or
Yeah.
not.
I never worried
I'm
about
not
it.
sure.
The makeup of any commission is determined by the town council when they create you.
Right now, it's just like.
In order to be
11 slots.
modified, it needs to be, you
Back
need
to
to
town
request the
council.
town council to make
Yeah.
whatever modification you want.
When we were back, I think I joined in 2016, pretty early days, and it was definitely, we thought of ourselves as different from groups that could easily be sued, groups that needed, groups that took legal action on economic matters. We were advisory, and we can, we've added a vice chair, which is why I'm sitting here tonight, but that's about the limit of extra seats and extra positions. But is there anybody else who feels we need alternates or anything closer to a full zoning board
Has
or
there ever
planning board?
been a challenge in getting enough attendance for a quorum?
No,
No.
it's only happened one time, 2 or 3 years ago.
3 years.
But,
Yeah.
so I think the question would be, because to your point that you've made a few times about trying to get some more diversity, like maybe we could get a woman on the committee?
Yeah.
Maybe we could ask the town council to authorize at least one alternate so that if you had someone that wanted to sit in for a while and get the feel of things, they could sort of just, check it out and
Right.
But an alternate would have to go, we have to be up on the things that we're deliberating, right? They would have to, right? If they're going to come in because someone is, so we're lacking a quorum or someone's.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the real question is how big do you want to make the group? If we go 11 now, our authorized strength of 11, so.
I did not mean to make this a discussion.
Now we're at 8:45 right now by my AI predictive tracker.
So someone mentioned it. Don't you guys have reserves? And I was like, I don't know.
As far as I know, the only two places where we have alternates are the planning board and the ZBA.
That
And
makes
that's-
a ton of sense.
A ton of
Yeah,
sense.
and that's because we perform legal business.
Yeah.
That's the
for sure.
key.
Right? And it helps ensure that we can get a quorum because we can have more people in the bullpen ready to step up to fill that quorum whenever needed. If you have issues with trying to make quorums sometimes, the better way would be to ask for your quorum requirement to be reduced.
Right.
It's happened once in 3 years. It's fine. Again, this
Great.
was a comment. So
Moving on. Great. It was just an interesting, it
Someone was
was
like,
great to
"Hey,
hear
you
that
have an alternate."
distinction between
Yeah.
legal business, where you need someone to literally step in like an alternate juror, and work on that. Great. The only other piece of business we have is the climate action plan, which you referenced the earlier version. We have a new version, which we'll be excited to share the final draft. There are 2 bullet points in the agenda. One is to share any overall impressions. Those were intended to go directly to, is it Sophie?
Yep.
And then I had offered some bullet points and some checklists, which I don't have open in front of me and I did not print out, for things residents could do. Tried to structure it in like easy mode, more capital, lots of capital mode. And so first, let's talk about the feedback directly to Sophie. If anyone wants to say that out loud or wants to summarize anything they wrote to her about the overall climate action plan.
I did write, and I don't know, this may have been beside the point, but on that number 2, on the resident reduction guide, I just thought it would be useful for Durham residents to know about alternatives to recycling materials that are often not accepted at the transfer station. And there are groups like TerraCycle and Ridwell, they will actually do some of this sort of stuff. And I think that's valuable information to know there's an alternative to do that. So I just sent her a note saying you might want to consider adding something like this to this section.
Nice.
I haven't heard a response, but
So we've got the swap shop, we've got the Durham transfer station with its very well thought out metal recycling and other places. And then you're suggesting that we make sure we have links to the other, especially now that the Durham-wide junk cleanup, the front loader doesn't come around the neighborhoods anymore. It's especially relevant for folks to have sites that would pick it up or places you can drop it off. Great.
That's a good point. I think, like, for example, batteries are not recycled at the,
that's exactly what
Thought they were.
but I believe Staples will recycle them.
You mean alkaline batteries,
Yeah,
like consumer ones? I know that they'll do your uninterruptible power supply, UPS, or lead batteries at the transfer station still, I believe. They have a really nice drop-off for those.
Yeah.
But just the
But it's not the you mean
It's just regular
Double
alkaline.
A.
Yeah, double A alkaline. I mean,
Okay.
they're no longer prohibited in the regular trash, so I think.
But they're not ideal.
But that's not an ideal way to dispose of them. So, anyway, yeah, it would be nice to collect, like you say, some alternate information.
Great.
Yeah, the name TerraCycle came up. Are you aware that they were sued for illegally having their waste burned in some foreign country several years ago?
Oh, no, I wasn't
They have
aware
a
of that.
very poor reputation.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know that.
We withdraw that suggestion. Like with
They
every
may have improved since then, I don't know, but this was several years ago.
every recycling company
The IMAC
is under
committee.
intense auditing pressure for this reason.
So the IMAC committee is all up they have a blurb in Friday updates every week where they cycle through all the different things and ways that you can recycle the stuff that doesn't go normally to your curbside, or
Nice.
better ways to do it than putting it at your curbside.
Nice.
So
That's right.
they're our town experts on that.
Great.
That's good.
So we can defer to them, but I think it's worth maybe, we could run that by them.
I'm not sure it was directly relevant because this is an energy committee and not a recycling committee, but I just thought I would throw it out there
Yeah.
and see where it went.
We always find an energy link to any material that needs to be rebuilt or redone, so you can definitely find energy in there. Any other comments directly to Sophie that we'd want to say out loud?
I had a couple of comments. I haven't sent them to her yet, but there was a mention in there about how Eversource has reduced the carbon content of its power, and that's partly how we've achieved some progress to date. But I pointed out, at least to the documents that I'm familiar with, they haven't reduced the carbon content of their power. In fact, it's gone up the last 2 years. They've been putting more biomass and more natural gas in the generation mix. So I just wanted to see if that's a correction, or if she's using different numbers, or...
Pretty sure Eversource considers biomass to be carbon neutral.
Yeah, well, that's the question.
That's
It's
the
not
controversial.
a greenhouse gas neutral, though. You know, it depends on these distinctions, which I was going to...
I'm well aware.
Yeah, so I was gonna, that was also, I had a question for UNH, whether the UNH emissions from their cogen plant, is that counted as regular, as if it was natural gas, or is it offset somehow
So
because
it's
it's...
considered renewable energy, but it's still emitting carbon,
Right,
yes.
So-
So it's renewable energy, but not carbon.
Carbon neutral.
so is it in our town greenhouse gas thing, it's counted as carbon emitting, then, is what you would
Is
say?
it in the current Durham inventory? Is that what you're asking?
I believe it, there's a big thing for
Okay.
UNH. That's what I was trying to understand
yeah.
from what,
I'll take
you know,
it.
I was just trying to understand how things are counted, because I know over time that landfill gas is going away, right? It's over the
Yes.
next. So, you know, how is that going to shift our accounting over the years?
It's a good question. UNH does not currently have a solution to replace the CHP plant. There's talk of electrification, but there's also talk of budget constraints.
Yeah, that's a big, that's obviously
We may have
a big-
heard that talk, yeah.
That's a biggie, yeah. Okay, well,
But no, so we're looking at strategies to electrify, then you need clean energy, you need clean electricity for that to achieve its goal as well. But it's still status quo for now.
yeah.
You're not alone. Berkeley just redid its cogen plant, and it had a similar, there are a bunch of cogen plants now going offline, and they're going into full electrification, and it's a capital intensive, and it's a very challenging transition. That's why
Especially with all these old buildings.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, when the natural gas from the landfill went in, there was a lot of anxiety around there that this would delay, the thing that had to happen later. It's interesting to see it playing out, of course, now in a very financially tight time. Steve, if I got your point for Sophie, it's any generic claim that Eversource is cleaner, you would like her to understand the definition of clean, if it includes biomass, if it includes the way Britain declares itself carbon neutral with a bunch of really garbage biomass imports. We want to at least be sophisticated about that claim, and understand that they are clean in this one definition, but they're leaning on carbon, fuel sources that are not carbon neutral. And so make sure that we're accurate on that. And ditto for UNH. I heard that we need to understand not only what is happening right now, but we need to be aware that a year or so, or whenever that switchover happens to all natural gas, that could be a very big, that could be a step function change.
I think we're looking at a decade.
A decade, okay. So past, that's the next,
Yeah, so the
plan.
document, and I can make it available, is that there are environmental disclosure statements that the utilities have to file every year, and they produce how many tons of carbon per kilowatt, that's
Got it.
basically the number. So that's gone
And that's
up.
gone up as
It's
you'd
gone
expect
up.
if you're
And-
burning more.
And it's actually higher, it has been higher from Eversource than the New England pool in general.
Okay.
The New England pool has more nuclear, less biomass, and things like that. So, anyway.
So power has arguably gotten dirtier on the
On the Eversource side.
Eversource, if it's no longer our default, but if it were, that would be the trend.
Yeah.
Got it. Great. Last call for?
Yeah, one more point. What is this? What's the page? 31. It mentions SW2 launch an educational campaign on the Durham Transfer Station's composting program to residents and businesses. A couple of months ago, I was dropping off our compost there and was stopped by somebody and kind of interviewing me about, oh, how's this going for you, et cetera. I don't know that very much about that effort. They seem to be gathering kind of townspeople's experiences with compost, et cetera, suggesting to me that there's sort of more afoot than just an educational campaign. They weren't there to educate, they were there to gather experiences, things like that. It sounded like that was a precursor to some kind of pilot program where, I don't know, they would hand out bins or, maybe compostable bags or something like that. So
You
that
caught
was
it, we caught it pretty much head on.
okay.
Like I said, I'm also sitting on the IMAC committee, and those are the folks who did the interview with you.
Okay.
And so the compost, we've been using the compost challenge over the last few years to collect data
Yes.
as to how much compost we're averaging per family when stuff brings in. And it also is helping us collect the information we need to go after some grants
Yeah.
to do a pilot program.
Okay.
So they're hoping to they're working on a grant right now that's due later this month, to try to do a Mr. Fox, a neighborhood pickup in a target neighborhood.
Yeah.
The neighborhood hasn't been picked yet, but they're looking at a couple of the smaller ones
Yeah.
as a thing to get it done. And then from that, we're hoping to be able to get the data, enough information to say, this is how much it costs, and this is how much didn't go into, this is how much we reduced the solid waste pickup, so that we could run the numbers and see what the net result would be if the town extended that over a wider area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Fox is in some neighborhoods already. Am I wrong about that? I see them in the faculty neighborhood, for example. Is that private?
Subscription
That's
model.
private pickup. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a subscription pickup. He'll come as often as you want, but you get charged by the visit. Usually it's every 2 weeks.
I have a question again for Matt. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but, so UNH has a lot of composting that they do from the cafeterias, right, over at the Kingman Farm area? They still
They have
do
been
that?
doing- I don't know if they're still using Kingman Farm, but that's been.
Okay.
the
I
path.
just wondered if there had been any thought of synergy between the town and what UNH does with, I don't know if what's being,
IMAC looked into that.
oh, they did, okay.
Kingman Farm has a limit to how much they can handle,
Uh-huh,
right? Because they're not allowed to sell it.
right. I
They
guess
can
that's,
only make as much as they can basically use themselves. And that's because they're part of the university. They're not allowed to turn things around and create revenue. At a time when
when they could use it,
they
yeah.
could really use it, right?
Yeah.
So that was the issue there. I mean, we
Okay.
tried to get into it, but there's no way they could absorb everything from the town.
That's what I was wondering. I had no idea what the relative amounts are that you're dealing with and capacity, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Whereas like in Brattleboro, Vermont, they do a community pickup and they compost, they created their own composting facility. And they actually have, they copyrighted, or whatever it is, not copyright, but yeah, I guess it is, Brattle Grow. It's their own compost. that they sell.
Trademarked it.
They trademarked it, yes, trademarked the compost, and
Interesting.
they actually will sell it they sell it by the truckloads.
Wow.
Wow. It sounds like a real opportunity for Durham. Yeah.
Well, I knew that the Kingman Farm, they had all this amazing equipment and stuff that they, used to do it, and I just didn't know if there was a possibility, but if they're at capacity, they're at capacity, so.
I've never heard of another company other than Mr. Fox locally. Have there been multiple vendors or other industrial compost organizations?
There's actually a website that I check periodically, which will tell you where in the state you can get composting.
From the consumer side, which would indicate that they're industrial producers. Got it.
Right, people who will pick it up for you, right? In this area, it's only Mr. Fox.
Makes sense.
And do we know anything about utilization from restaurants, coffee shops? I mean, coffee grounds are fantastic, and there's a lot produced. Are any of the Durham restaurant establishments kind
I don't
of
know.
using?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
No, and that's not a part of the pilot, or
No.
no?
But those are your heavy hitters, just like the UNH dining halls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
I'll just say that Riverwood's uses Mr. Fox.
It
Oh,
does,
really?
great.
Okay.
So there's an enormous cafeteria. Great. All right, any other thoughts? We've heard mostly things about on the transfer station, on the recycling of materials, on reducing the weight of the materials that we send into landfill. I think all of those have an energy component, if also part of our waste committee's purview as well. Anything else that jumped out? And if not, we'll go to ideas for residents. I believe I sent it to everybody. I have not recirculated it. We can also table it to say, hey, I didn't get the email, and
You mean a copy of the report?
it's not just the report, but I believe I sent to the DEC list, and it'd be good to know if people didn't get it, because it means you're not on the DEC list, a list of things we could recommend. Sophie had a final page which had 1 or 2 items in it, and it was just begging for our committee to put some text in there. I put some text in there. I sent around, I think, a Google Doc or a Word document.
When did you send that?
I sent it about 2 weeks ago, a
2
week
weeks
ago,
ago.
so it's in the distant.
All right.
When was it?
May 25th.
May 25th, so I should have resent it for this conversation. Long story short, we don't need to delay this meeting. I think I'll resend it after this meeting. And the goal would be, this will be pasted in some form or another into the last page. She asked for ideas, we give her ideas. And we'll have maybe one more digital round of, hey, this idea doesn't pan out. Emily, a former committee member, had wanted to make sure that the claims at the end for the total impact of doing this matched both what the cap said, Durham households were responsible for, and I think, some of those figures I was just spitballing. So I think we'll work on the beginning and the end, the why does this matter? But there are like a list of like to-do items that you could walk through and do. I think it might be particularly weak on building certifications.
Sure.
Like I don't think I really thought through, hey, you're building something, hey, you've got there might be like an advanced mode,
Yeah.
which would be your experience, or a renovator's mode that would be on here. I let the building checklist kind of carry that weight.
Yeah.
I mean,
None of these are
you covered it in reasonable depth, at least for like what people can do easily, and you footnoted everything. So
Cool.
I mean, when I looked at it, I was like, there's, to me, the next step from here is more of like, who do you talk to get this type of stuff,
Yeah.
you know, done for you? Or like, how do you DIY it? Because like,
Insulation,
right, like, so if people specifically are like, what do I need if I want to run my own level 2 charger in my house, right?
right.
It's like, well, you need 240 volt, you need 40 amp fuse, right?
You could use a dryer plug if
Right.
you want to do it affordably and not tip the electrician off that you're.
Or if I want to do the insulation myself, which insulation should I use? You know, like, I mean, the way you have it laid out, like, I think it's more of just a question of like, do we want to add additional resources? There may be something on glazing in there, maybe something on window glazing,
And low E coatings and other.
Yeah, because you know, you do mention a lot of other weatherization stuff, and then the only other thing that stuck out to me was maybe specifically calling out lawn care implements. You know, like I think a lot of people are still defaulting to gas leaf blowers and gas lawnmowers, and you know, even for my 2 acres of lawn, I use largely electric stuff. So I think a lot of people just might not know they're as good. So just like
The
info on
consumer
that kind of
report,
stuff.
they've passed whatever that
Yeah,
consumer
literally
reports
consumer
threshold is.
reports style like information might round it out.
Nice.
I guess, Mike,
This is ideas for what?
Oh, so do you want
Residents.
You would admit, that there was the town climate action plan had a final section. To frame it a little more directly, the town has done a lot of work on its municipal energy supply. It's done a lot of work on rebuilding this building and rebuilding each of its physical plants. It's worked on its waste supplies, its transportation fleet, its police department. There was a sense in the climate action plan that the town was nearing, you know, that sort of difficult last 20% that was very expensive to remediate, and there wouldn't be many more big bangs for the town council and Todd to basically do before 2030. And what was left in the, if you do a climate action plan and you say it's everyone in Durham, what was left was UNH doing its own careful work. And then Durham residents and Todd and the town council and this committee basically just have we have an educational, a little bit of zoning, a little bit of site plan. And that's about it. We've had an energy checklist for 10 years, trying to, whenever somebody does a renovation, to try to encourage these things. In the past, we've offered consultations, but the gist of this edition of the climate action plan was, kind of now in the last 5 years of this plan, we have to drive this out into the single family homes, the duplexes, and the bigger developments. And we asked for this checklist of ideas, things we could do to kind of end the report. If you made it all the way through the report this year, the goal was you would feel inspired to go through some of these things, and as Matthias says, replace that next lawnmower with an Ego battery mower. Do each or any of these things.
So you talk about things like energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency, insulate first.
And how about things like replacing your stove with induction cooktops?
I believe that's in there, and if it's not, electrification in general.
Okay.
But I'll make sure that there's cooked up. But the whole electrification program is, what folks should be looking for.
This report is consistently amended every so often. There's a sustainability fellow from UNH who it's her job to
You read the 23 one.
to update it. So she's updating it right now, and what she's asking for is comments to kind of add to it. It's a relatively long document. It kind of lays out the town's carbon reduction goals over a 5-year period.
Yes.
And so then it gets consistently refreshed. So
There are always new efficiency means I mean, for example, there are heat pump dryers. Is that in there? There's ozone washers. Is that in there?
Yeah, see, that's kind of the open comment thing that we have going right now is what kind of additional stuff do we want to add to it? So I think we'll probably, get a link to the report to you, and if you have additional comments, you can add them.
It would be great to and make sure that I have your email at the end of this meeting. It'd be great to circulate that to you.
I think to me, the biggest question is, and it's fine to go after some of these things that I would say is more on the minor side, but
Yeah, that was kind of where I started.
how do we identify, or let me rephrase that. Is there a way for the committee with work to identify where some of the bigger bang for the bucks may be in terms of looking at are there buildings in town, either residential or commercial, that you can kind of readily spot as likely energy hogs?
I think that was the initial push for the heat pumps, when they did
When Emily was talking
the
about
signs I still have in my house and everything, because that was like the easiest return on investment. Like she said, it worked out better than windows, weatherization.
Right, but my question is you can put information out in whatever format to try and encourage people to do stuff, and they might or might not even see it, number one. But the question I'm asking is whether or not, if you want to embark on a journey to try and identify the buildings prospectively, and then go out and contact the owners and say, look, this is what we've looked at. It looks like you've got a building that's 30,000 square feet.
The investment money that was initially set aside for buying out the quarry solar array, and we chose to keep it. There was a question, because that money is set aside specifically for energy improvement stuff, like perhaps some of that money can be used as, like, we could do it on an incentive basis. It's kind of like a town rebate.
Right, well, I'm just trying to get at the point is, even before you have to develop a method to actually remedy it, the first question is, can you identify where the problems are?
Get a thermal camera
I think it's heating.
on a car.
On a helicopter, yeah.
I think it's pretty obviously heating.
I don't mean what the topic is, I mean which buildings?
The
I'm saying
residential
windows open in
environment
December.
is what we identified as the vast majority.
Right, well, I was going beyond the residents. I was looking for where's the biggest bang for the buck. So it's like, okay, so you can look at individual houses that might be, a couple thousand, 3,000 square feet. Are there buildings, like, for example, one of the thoughts in my mind, like the frats, that might be much bigger and maybe more energy intense and older, that you can say, okay, there's certain buildings in town that you can look at and say, these are energy hogs that are consuming large amounts of energy. Can we direct something to those owners?
A lot of buildings like that in the historical district, you've got older.
Don't go on campus.
Well, see, but that's kind of the thing is,
but that's almost like a separate.
We can only do so much with the
UNH
historical
is its
district.
own
And the infrastructure issue there isn't how the heat's being generated,
No,
it's how it's
you
being
get it.
distributed.
Yeah.
Right? It's the way the buildings are zoned. I mean, for the person on the first floor to be comfortable, the person on the third floor is roasting.
So I think that was kind of a previous conclusion that kind of predated us, was that the residential built environment is actually where the most change can be made, oddly enough, bang for buck. I don't know if that's still true. It might be worth reevaluating, but looking at the energy usage pie chart as we had it before, it was like 75% of the energy usage for the town. And we had checked off all these other municipal buildings where we had done improvements already.
Right. I guess I'm really thinking more of commercial properties, whether it's rental, residential, rental, commercial properties, things like that, not just individual homeowners.
When we looked at this about 10 years ago, they were divided into new construction, which we had appropriately new zoning, and we actually dramatically changed the insulation and the way all of the new construction was built. And then there were properties that were relatively intractable. They were not, scheduled for major renovations. There was not a capital fund, and that's where that discussion, like the ones that are left that weren't built since 2010, they're hard nuts to crack for all the reasons you mentioned.
It basically is an urban renewal project.
Deep infrastructure, piping, heating system, New England building practices that are just, you have to rip the guts out of the building and put it back in. So we were on Matthias's channel where it was the single family home, it was the duplexes, it was basically going out to this, whether it's 75 or it's a large percentage.
Yeah, I don't remember it for sure.
And the
whatever it was.
techniques were, electrify everything, transition town, solarize. We had a program, Energize 360, where we basically decided to hold workshop instead of just a Durham day. You basically gather vendors in, you get some bulk pricing, you get some group discounts, maybe there's some revolving loan fund, some equity funds that are available from the town, and you try to move that needle. Individual education, I completely agree with you. We can talk all day into these microphones, and we'll get kind of some true believers who are going to do it anyway, and we'll get a few people who say, But we did find that when you bring 80 people into a school auditorium and you talk to them about electrify everything and you give out free copies of the book, something can happen.
I know this may be going too far afield, so rein me in. Feel free to rein me in. But this is something I brought up in emails about thinking about now the residential aspect of Durham, not just the big commercial buildings, of doing some sort of biannual survey or something to understand what people's thinking is, what's the level of ignorance or knowledge they have about what their options are, and what is keeping them from implementing some of these solutions for their house.
What are the barriers?
And if we had data like that we could redo on some sort of basis, then we would have a better way of formulating some sort of educational plan or something to try and also get the residents of Durham to think about this. I mean, I'm sitting there with a south-facing roof that would be perfect solar paneling. I can't afford it.
But
I
with a
can't afford it.
solarize and a property tax and some other things, you might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so
The tax credits don't.
I'll bring up a point. First of all, thanks for putting this together. It was fantastic. I mean, I really like how it's organized in terms of, low-hanging fruit and, things like that. One thing that came to my mind was the topic of embodied carbon. So a lot of the emphasis here is on things that use electricity. But think about siding materials, for example. I mean, when we were building out our house, we were considering pine versus western hemlock, right? So western hemlock obviously comes from all the way across the country. So once it's on your, building, it's the exact same in terms of its carbon use, but just to get it there, massive, massive difference. And how we were installing it meant that the sort of mildew resistant and insect resistant properties of western hemlock weren't as important. We were using sort of a rain screen and sort of open siding so the pine itself could dry out. So really and aesthetically we didn't have a strong preference either. So the slight advantage that we got in insect resistance and things like that to us wasn't worth the huge difference in embodied carbon. I think embodied carbon, it sounds like a really complicated principle. I actually think you can get people on board and sort of understanding it pretty well. It's like basically comes down to
makes sense.
Yeah. So again, when people are at those decision points, right? Having a little bit of education around that could be great.
Nice.
There's the American Institute of Architects has a website which lists common materials which are low embodied carbon for residences.
Yeah. Concrete is super hot, So, if you're, maybe choosing between, I don't know, a little complicated between asphalt and concrete, what is the difference? That's an interesting question, but,
But there's things like insulation and flooring and things like that.
Sure.
Nice.
I thought this was a really good list, and when it's solidified and finalized, I'd like to put it into our town website, the Energy Committee website. We have a bunch of pages there that are really outdated
Nice.
of
I agree, that would be
resources, you know, I think this would be a great thing to just
What can you do?
modernize that and put it in there. And the other thing is that since a lot of this stuff is very, you know, individual resident focused, to me, it's very hard to measure, right? We don't have any way of knowing who put in heat pumps or who did what.
Talked about
I don't know
last
if there's
time,
any.
mapping those, yeah.
Right. I don't know if there's, I mean, it's kind of a hokey thing, but if we could generate some kind of a, you know, the town will give you a free, you know, coffee mug. You come in and tell us, you know, what energy thing you've done this year, you know, and
survey idea. We used to run those
Yeah.
every year, an energy survey.
you know, and
yeah.
then every week in the town update, you get your picture taken with your mug. Say, here's Joe Blow. He put in put an electric, you know, water heater, a heat
I was
pump.
talking to Tracy about the
You know.
heat pump tracking thing. And
Steve, I think you might have missed it last week, but last month, we had a discussion of where the data is in the auditors, the way it was categorized. Sorry.
yeah,
And did
so
you-
she essentially found out she would have to go through building permits to make it work, because the way it was getting transferred to the tax cards was essentially based on what the contractor wrote down in their building permit. So that could have been a model, that could have been just like
AC I had.
they could have said air conditioner. They could have said air source. They could have said, you know, just Mitsubishi.
Oh, yeah.
But she told me she's started tracking it, and she went backwards to April 1st. So from April 1st to now, she has tracked 7 additional installs of air source.
That's a rate of change
heat
that could be
pumps.
useful
Yeah.
regardless of the baseline.
And so she was saying, you know, if she had a little bit of help and someone that could be trusted to go through the town records, you know, they could go back further, but you do have to go through building permit after building permit. So it's like a pretty tedious process. But she is tracking them going forward, and she said, you know, she's happy to send out reports to the DC email to update on those sort of things. So, I mean, I think it would probably start to be worth her time if we can do the same thing for electrical permits that specifically call out chargers. But yeah, just because that was right on topic. So maybe we can start to fill in a little bit of data at that. But I asked her, I was like, you know, I did mine a couple years ago, and she's like, yeah, I don't know. It's probably on your tax card as air conditioning.
Yeah.
And so then going back and editing them, yeah, maybe it might be an elective thing where we start to kind of have our citizens kind of, I don't know, submit it as part of tax time or something.
Well, the other thing is thinking, just looking forward, and I don't know if there's any rules and regulations on what you can and can't ask in a building permit, but one of the thoughts might be is sort of look at building permits, do an exercise of looking back, and I did look through building permits one day for another reason, and you know, there's a couple hundred a year or something like that. It's not you know, impossible to do it. It's like a couple people could go through it in
Yeah,
a
but she
couple
does
hours.
3 other jobs on top of that.
Oh, no, I'm not asking her to do it. I'm just saying, you know,
Yeah.
it could be a subgroup do it, but.
I thought maybe a UNH didn't.
Well, or that too,
sustainability
but
student.
my point being is, if you look through the stuff and see what you gather, what you actually get for information, and you start to have, if you look at 100 building permits that involve HVAC, and you say, okay, this is pretty much what we see with the type of information we get and how random or scattered it is. Say, can we redesign the permit for these things so that you can put a few select questions like, okay, if you're installing air conditioning, heat pump, whatever, is it going to be used as the primary heat source, or is this going to be used as a backup heat source?
I might be
that type of a
wrong.
question.
I might be wrong, but I think they might use a standardized building permit, but I think
They
I've
might, I'm
heard
just saying-
Audrey bring that up.
Well, no, I'm saying I don't know what the rules and regulations are around. I'm just saying it might be worth exploring.
cleaner data
that
if we added an overlay.
build something now, 5 years from now, the committee that's meeting can say, okay, now we've got 5 years of good data of what's
I like
going
that
on.
idea.
Well,
If it's-
what she said was she started adding it as a question as the building permit process.
But what did she add?
she's like asking them, as far as I understand through email, like, you guys had this listed, what kind of heating is it?
Right, what I'm suggesting is it would probably be better if you want to say,
I'm just
okay,
giving you more color.
right,
We used to.
figure out exactly how you can succinctly ask a couple or a few questions that will get you the best information that you really want. And not just leave it up to randomness of what someone provides, or she might ask somebody or what. And say, okay, prospectively, we'd like to know, is it primary, is it secondary, what's the capacity, how many BTUs is it, that type of stuff.
A guide for this could be the, what is it, American Institute of Appraisals. They have a relatively comprehensive green addendum that, just has a ton of.
There's also lead for home.
Yeah. Just to not, reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to say she's aware of it and has at least started to track it. So anything we can do from that is added.
But is that notion of modifying the building permit to have questions to be more specific about this information?
I was gonna ask Audrey
Is that
that.
I don't know, I'm just saying that's something we can
Is that
explore.
practical for the
We
town
can-
to do?
I'm going to ask Audrey.
We
the code
required-
enforcement officer
Yeah.
about it.
We required the energy considerations checklist with building permits, and so folks had to check that off and turn that in with it. So we could change the packet of materials that you deliver with a building permit. And so, I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but that's this long list from xeriscaping to.
Yeah, and for the record, this was decided a while ago. We're waiting to change the energy checklist until the new NEC building code controversy is finalized. That was the whole thing.
But what Mike's suggesting, I think, is interesting, that if we were to do an Electrify Everything campaign and we were to design an overlay, here's your energy permit and here's this overlay of these very specific vetted questions that would let us track this campaign. We have a campaign in a classic marketing sense. We want to we're starting it. We want to see change over time, and all building permits have this sort of cover sheet. And it has our critical questions that are in the 5-year run to 2030. And I think your suggestion is an interesting one, that whether we modify the actual one, just including it in the packet, getting a 70% response rate would improve the quality of our data and possibly allow the tax assessor thing, to get a little more accurate as well. So something's in there. It'd be great to hear back next meeting what Audrey says, if it's an overlay, we've got the long energy checklist and we have the maybe official lockdown permit. But that would be great to know. Great idea.
I also thought it was a good idea to perhaps get volunteers, if the town is willing to have people go through prior records. We could have somebody from this committee, perhaps volunteer. I'd be willing if I could get trained on what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
or if other people have expertise. We could provide some manpower.
You might not need to go back that far into the past, right? Because how long have heat pumps really been a realistic thing to put into your home?
15 years.
So, that's not like you were looking back to 1899.
Yeah.
And the cold
And
weather.
somebody said there's only 100
high value,
years, so
like the
that's not too
high
bad.
efficiency and cold weather, I thought were even more recent.
10 to 7 years.
They feel more like a 10 to 7 year for the first ones that I saw.
But there's other things more than just this.
The hot water heaters, the
Electric power, and that's the thing, it's also, you might not pull a building permit, but you might pull an electrical permit for something that's pertinent to this. So we're also looking into different types of permits at the same time. Anyways,
awesome.
Just one more beat on this. So one of the biggest bottlenecks that we ran into, and this is widespread, is financing for some of these what are often called superabundancies. Extra insulation, double-studded walls, et cetera, when there are alternatives that are a lot less green, but basically cost less. If Durham could align itself with trying to support people in making sort of arguments, essentially to banks, which is really hard to do because there's barriers, and things like that, but in advocating for an initial pre-construction appraised value so that people can get the capital to do this, that would be a huge leap forward. It's hard to find the capital once you're already built. If you're doing a relatively substantive or substantial renovation or a whole new construction or something like that, being able to get the financing on the basis of an appraised value that reflects the value of sort of some of these green features, both passive and active, huge advantage.
That could be identifying banks that have appraiser guidances that take this into
Yes,
account. You
yeah.
can go to 2 different banks, and depending on their instructions to their appraisers, that you get 0 credit or some credit,
Yeah.
and that would be a neat thing to know.
Yeah.
You're talking about for a whole new house.
Either a whole new house or a substantial renovation would,
Okay.
yeah. Anything you'd be getting financing for.
Anything with a construction loan.
Yeah.
Are there building contractors who are known for building highly efficient homes or renovations?
Yeah.
Maybe we should identify those. I don't know.
Yeah. The committee has, like all town committees, has
We're not allowed to recommend businesses.
has a complex relationship, but if we hold when we do a solarized or an energized
We can
360,
invite
we can invite competitive bids, we can have a public selection process, and then in that narrow sense, we can recommend, this is our group for group funding. And that's about the only.
That's one of the
time.
problems with the climate action plan for the residential things is we can't just have a link, like a list of links to different businesses that homeowners can go to if they want insulation or like if they want any of the services we're trying to educate them
We can
about.
pretty quickly unravel on us.
Does New Hampshire Saves have a vetted list of contractors?
I think we could do that, or maybe,
I mean, we point to New Hampshire Saves.
yeah, or the Clean Energy Commission, maybe, yeah.
Clean Energy New Hampshire.
NHCC, yeah. Clean Energy.
To Steve's point about our website, these are all great questions to ask about our links to lists of links. Yep, I think that's great. So we scheduled about 45 minutes for the next section, activities toward the 2020 goals. I feel like with Mike's forward-looking comments, we're sort of transitioning into, well, what do we do for the 2025 goals? If there's no objection, I'd love to just move on to that and hope that folks will pile on with email on this, on the existing checklist. Great. So the next topic we had was the EV ordinance. Thank you so much for your on-the-spot edits and I know you removed one more thing, but I'd love for the whole committee to hear what was said in email and.
Right, so the EV ordinance was sent to the planning board, to the director of planning and to our new committee member, who's the chairperson of the planning board.
It's a short trip.
Just recently, last few days. So that's out there. And it'll be up to them then to pick up from that and start to decide when they're going to look at it from a planning board perspective. So that part's done. The second part that I just wanted to touch on today, which I sent everybody an email late this afternoon, just to have it in front of you, was Emily had, I copied, when I sent the stuff out, I copied Emily and Jack because they've been so heavily involved in this before. And Emily just sort of came back and sort of said, comment
These
to
are
me.
former committee members who just rotated off. Great.
Highly suggesting, recommending that we also pursue the zoning aspect of it separately and move that along also. So I tackled that also yesterday and today and put that together quickly, somewhat dirty, but at least for discussion purposes. And
I think that's kind of how we want to do it for the zoning part. It
Right,
made
well,
sense to me.
Right, well, it made sense to me, but the gentleman that's in charge of overseeing it is sitting right down here 5 feet from me. And we had a very brief chat.
Just giving you some kudos.
At the beginning of the meeting today. So hopefully Paul will just chime in here, but just to tell you what my thoughts were, trying to keep it as simple as possible, was to define, we had discussed before in the committee, the difference between an ancillary use charging, which we wanted to advocate would be allowed everywhere, and a primary use charging station where you set up, half a dozen or 10 fast chargers, whatever the case may be. It could be a business unto itself. Maybe it's part of a convenience store, who knows? But differentiating those, because when we had discussed this previously in the committee, part of the discussion was around whether or not it could become an issue if you had a fast charging setup with multiple fast chargers. You might have enough turnover. And again, thinking to the future, that if the battery technology that we're seeing being bought out in China, and perhaps Ford's working on it, where you start getting really quick charges of 10 minutes, it starts to get more like a fueling station and people may be topping off more regularly, you may have traffic. And that type of a thing might not fit well adjacent to a residential neighborhood. Right now in town, and again, this is sort of history for folks that haven't been here, the only places in town where gasoline service stations are allowed are like right here on this strip. So it's
So-called gasoline alley.
Gasoline alley, so it's very narrowly defined. Clearly, we don't want to limit it to that much. And so the discussions that we'd had before were, okay, you could look at business and commercial areas. Generally, it doesn't have the toxic aspects of a gasoline station. But just being sensitive to and aware of the potential for traffic, particularly if you got into very fast charging modes where people just, on the way to work, you stop and get gas, you stop and get a charge. Thinking about positioning that's what went into it. So that's how I went about making this in the two definitions. I simply made a definitional, which I found from a couple of other cities that had these things already done, between a charging station, which is intended to be a primary use, and a charging spot, which is my difference in definitions, and then just plugged it into the table of uses in terms of what was being permitted across the board, which would be the charging spot for, a parking spot somewhere or in front of a CVS or whatever, versus the charging station, which would be limited into the commercial districts. And that was, what I put in that was just my looking at the map and thinking what made sense to me personally, and not anything more than that at this point. So it would be up for discussion. Paul had suggested at the beginning of the meeting, we just had a little sidebar conversation, that there's at the end of the table of uses, there's a section called what, Paul?
Uses accessory to any allowed use.
Right. It's a short list of about 5 things that the parking spot part could go in there, so that just gives it the...
It's the same place where we put things like parking.
Yeah. What a coincidence.
That seems rational.
But just to, make it part of the code, so to speak, so that would be clear to anybody in the future that that's what that is. So that's what I had done, but I think the real key comments here would be what Paul wants to add on top of this.
Yeah. So, we got 2 pieces that we're talking about here. I look at them and I see one that's going to require some chewing, and one which we can throw right through pretty easily. So, the little zoning change, we're adding a couple of definitions and a couple of lines to the table of uses. I can throw that in between my big projects whenever it comes along. I've been doing, just to give you an idea, we had 4 different zoning changes last Wednesday at our workshop that we were working on, right? 2 going back to the town council, 1 going to a public hearing, and 1 which we are now going to chew on for a couple of months.
Wow.
All right, because we're rewriting the conservation subdivision chapter. It'd be like, think the solar chapter, but twice as big.
Right.
Okay. So what I try to do is I try to keep us on one big chewing project at a time. And right now I have several in my queue. So I don't know whether you're going to end up as in the on-deck circle or the next guy waiting to get into the on-deck circle. But my plan is to have the big one done by the end of the year. Okay. At this point, I can't promise anything faster. But like I said, this little thing, we can do those. This is the type of thing that we can talk about in half an hour and set a public hearing, and and some people will come, we see who shows up and what they say, and then maybe we tweak it and then send it off to the town council. So that one should go pretty quick.
So the main EV ordinance part, though, in terms of the bigger document,
the one that,
I think that would take several months.
That's going to take several months. I might be able to throw that, because the way you have it set up now, right, as we just sort of discussed, is it's really going to be a site plan regs thing.
Right.
And right now, it's still kind of written, I gotta go and take a look at the site plan regs to see what their format is. So I might need to change the format of it. But what I wanna do is next time I get a light agenda, I'll bring it to, well, I'll talk with Michael. I gotta check with Michael on whether or not it's thing, but I think it's time for the planning board to get at least a glimpse of it. And we can, because what will happen is I'll then say, all right, when we're big with this big chewing project, what's our next one going to be? And they'll know what they all are, and they'll say, we want to do that one next.
Nice. It started its history as this merger of zoning rules and site plan. I think Mike and the team got clarity from Michael Barrington, others about about the difference between the two of those things. And if there is a longish delay, a revise and if you know like the lingo that would be helpful, give us a revise and resubmit, with an example of the site plans too. That's that's one thing we could do in the intervening months, is to try to write it.
And that's kind of what I do, is whoever's going to be next, I try to redraft as much as possible.
Give us some guidance.
The last year or so.
Great. So we can look forward to that maybe summer or the fall, whenever you get a chance to take a look at it, a peek at it. We'll get a determination that there's, a revision process before it goes to really be chewed on.
Yep.
If I understand you right. And then the thing that we carved off in zoning might fit into your quicker,
There's a shot I could have that done in July.
send and go. It's the opposite of what I thought was true. We were sort of like, site plans will be easier and zoning, but I understand.
It was what we have with whenever we start having, in fact, I was having a chat with Todd and this came up, and I explained to him the difference between making something just EV ready as opposed to EV station, right? EV installed. And it calmed him down a little bit, because he thought at first, first thing he thought is we're going to be requiring EV charging stations at all the different things.
We were going to pick a winner, and then there would be no EVs, and
and I said, most of it is simply a matter of making the site ready when you have it open, so that then it's so much easier to install them. And I think once everybody gets the idea that that's not going to be 90% of what happens, they'll be okay with it.
We're not picking your brand of EV charger that you're going to have sitting on your property because of some.
And it's also the issue too, I think, which we need to, when we get the opportunity to get before the planning board, is sort of put out there, is you got to look at the math part in terms of what the formulas that we put in, because you look at it and say, everybody's going to have to put this up. It's like, not really. If you recall from the discussions, based on the number of employees, you had to have 17 employees on a shift that would trigger you actually having to have one installed unit. And there's not many businesses in town, or likely to be, that actually have 17 employees at a whack. There's a lot of smaller stuff that's 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and it's not going to affect them.
You're looking at the folks up on Technology Drive,
Right.
Hannaford.
Yeah. Maybe. Hannaford.
They probably peaked that,
Yeah.
close to that. But yeah, maybe Hannaford. If they expand into the Rite Aid, most likely Hannaford.
Nice.
They'll need more people.
Any other, we should probably go to B and C on our agenda to end at 8:30, but I wanted to thank you both for this.
Yes, thank you.
This determination, and I think by the end of the year is what it is, and we want it well considered. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Just a inform me kind of thing. So why number of employees rather than number of customers?
Because for most of these businesses that we looked at, the real issue came, and it depends on the situation, you gotta read the ordinance, but
Yeah.
in many situations, it's like, so if you got I don't know, good example, well, just the Hannaford's.
Yeah.
Customers going to Hannaford's, they're in and out like probably, for the most part, probably half an hour tops.
Yeah.
Probably not gonna be charging their car when they go there. So it's really the employees. You have a business that's big enough that you get enough employees that are expecting to be able to drive their car to work from somewhere that they want to charge while they're at work and have something for them. But for a restaurant, another example, maybe you have a large restaurant with 100 seats.
Yeah,
You're in there for an
it was
hour,
like the
hour and a
bars and
half.
restaurants that don't really have
Yeah.
much parking anyway.
And you're not going to go there expecting to
And
have
charge your
parking,
car,
so
right.
yeah,
And
that-
level 2 is not the right tech
Yeah.
usually
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, that's
in
great.
addition.
Thanks.
Great. All right, well, thanks again for the editing and the work. It
Yeah.
makes the minutes look small, the number of revisions you've done on that. Incredibly impressive to follow through. And the tactical choices you made during,
Well, it wasn't just me. It was-
between meetings.
There were other people involved.
Absolutely, but you've been driving it forward, so that's great. The next item is Durham Day, and I want to make sure we leave time for CPCNH because I don't think we got updates last time. And so, can someone remind me of the Durham Day date again? Has it been settled?
Yes, Todd told us last time it was August. It's in the minutes. It is in here.
16?
I thought that was Farm Day.
August 7th from 3:30 to 8 p.m.
August
So-
It's a
7th?
Thursday, I think.
August what again? Sorry.
August 7th, 3:30 to 8 p.m. And I don't remember where it was going to be, but it's in Durham.
Downtown, maybe, then
Probably 66 Main Street.
Yeah.
Yes,
pretty sure
yeah, I
it's
think that
there.
was it, yeah.
it's in that little parking lot,
Yeah.
mini park.
Yeah. That's where it's been the last couple of years.
The idea
So I
is
guess the
that-
question is do it's going to be different because it's not a weekend and it's not, during the day, but do we do sort of the same thing that we had done previously? With a table and displays and some information handout, or?
And I guess the other question was, it's kind of more towards the fall, right? So is there anything, like, do we want to prioritize kind of maybe like different content than we would in the middle of summer? Like, I mean, winter is, like, we don't really usually put up anything about winterization when Durham Day is earlier in the summer. I mean, I still have all the signs. They're great signs. And this stuff you put together with all the available EVs, like, people always love going through that binder, but I don't know, since it's a different time of year, like, do we want to talk about heating or?
Coupon for Ego leaf blower.
I mean, if you can find coupons, that'd be awesome. I mean, last year we
that'd be
ran the
good.
survey.
Wouldn't that be great?
We ran the EV
For any
survey
people,
last
really.
year. Maybe this year we retooled the survey for finding out some of
Around
the
electrification.
or home efficiency stuff. Ask people if they've upgraded their insulation, have upgraded their windows, what are they using for heating and cooling. People didn't seem to have much of a problem giving us their name and address when they were residents. When we did that last year, I mean, we only got a few dozen respondents, but it's
We could have a raffle or something that would, some kind of energy gift or something that could drive survey participants if we wanted. I'm sure that would be pretty easy to pull off.
that EV bike shop seemed kind of interested in ideas like that during our EV showcase last year. That would probably be a paid raffle because that would be probably a pretty valuable
It's going to
bike.
raffle off an air pump. Not a bike.
Yeah. Maybe one tire off of an electric bike. But those, I think that EV bike shop also sells electric bike conversion kits where you swap out the rear hub It's got the in-hub electric.
Even $100 off an EV bike is.
Yeah, just a coupon.
What we
would
really
probably be-
need is something
yeah.
to just make people
draw.
pause
Yeah.
and start poking
A
at an
draw.
iPad. Great.
Yeah, so I mean,
So I guess the question, if it's happening in August, and we decided last meeting to cancel the July meeting,
Yeah,
And
it's a
this is
subcommittee
June.
and somebody got we need a subcommittee and volunteers.
there's only going to be maybe, depends on what day of the week it is, the meeting in August might catch before it. So I think we're going to need a work group to
I agree.
work.
Anyone eager to, so do I request like volunteers for a work group or what's the?
I would,
Yeah.
Suggest that would be
Anyone like to volunteer for, not necessarily staffing the tables? I think that's, that might be a separate question, but developing the plan for kicking something off at this Durham Day.
I'd be willing to help out. I mean, as a newbie, I'm not in the position to lead it or to chair it or anything like that because I have no experience in this. But if you need someone to do grunt work, I'll do the grunting.
I can lead that.
you've got all the display stuff and the,
Yeah.
Posters and
So
stuff like that.
I think I can organize for that.
Great.
And then for subcommittees, we usually do 3, right?
I mean, you can go up to 5 technically, but I mean,
Yeah,
I would
anything
say,
so
I would
far.
go 4 at least.
I can join because I'd love to find our Survey Monkey and find our iPads or figure out the survey story.
Yeah. I'll email Sophie about that.
I bought the original Survey Monkey thing that the Energy Committee used to use, and I don't know where it went. So if we have it or Sophie has it, great.
Oh, well, yeah, she has the EV survey we did, which I think was a little bit more than Survey Monkey, but I don't remember.
Happy to help too.
Great.
Seems like a good task for newbies. Like
Yeah, it's fun. And,
grab the broom. Yeah.
and it's a good chance to, talk to the public.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge to the committee would be, it's going to be 2025. There's like this, it is 2025. We're in this 5-year rundown to a lot of 2030 targets. We could frame this as, we could have the climate action plan. We could have the path to 2030 and the role of electrification in that, and kind of frame the survey with a little like a temporal urgency. I think, Mike, you were getting at, like, how do we produce some momentum and some metrics and some tracking behind this, unsolved lump of carbon that the committee identified. And so this could be our, initial seed the idea event. I don't think we have enough time to do a Energize 360, to do a discounts or groups or things, but it could be like, this is where we gather the data, and then maybe, at the turn of the year or in the winter, we come up with a more concentrated plan of the kind you were, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd have the ability to pull together a real scientific type survey between now and August 7th and have it ready to go, but
50 names and addresses with heat pumps would be.
could certainly start with 5 basic questions.
Yeah.
That becomes a conversational
Yeah.
type thing that you sort of gather some standard
Yeah.
interview
It would also help
information.
us formulate our questions for the real
Exactly.
McCoy when it comes out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
Sort of a focus group type thing where you can
Yeah.
get people and talk to them for 5 minutes.
Or focus group, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got this, okay, so we have this scent of something important coming maybe in the fall, and we're gonna try to develop, so I think that's doable for this working group, that we can have big buttons on an iPad, or we can have forms or things, and we can get some we can find out a bunch of things from people who walk by us and show interest. Okay, and then we could post that on our website as we typically do, Friday updates, and continue the surveying, throughout the whole summer. Great. All right, we have our working group. That's terrific. CPCNH.
Sure. Okay, so I did send out, I hope everybody got earlier today, kind of a status report, so I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I just want to hit the high points and then take any questions people have. Probably the biggest piece of news was that the PUC issued a decision on May 20th, basically reversing something that they had proposed in the last fall, which was to shift costs for energy that had been collected by the utilities to essentially spread it over their entire customer base instead of just over the customers that subscribe to their power. So anyway, they basically reversed that, which, we had lobbied
It's a major
heavily.
victory,
It's
is
a
it not?
major victory in the
Wow.
state, thank goodness. So the upshot of that is that over this last rate period, the utilities had kind of started using this plan where they're going to buy more of their power on the spot market or more, less pre-buying of the power for the whole rate period, doing more kind of at the last minute or
Risky
speculative.
arbitrage, arguably.
So the intent was to get better deals, right? But it's also risky. Prices go up, and then so what's happened over this last 6 months? We had the coldest winter in 10 years. Not really predicted to be the coldest winter, so it caught a lot of people in the power business and the energy business, in the wrong place. CPC&H among them. We made some decisions that were poor in terms of based on historical records. This was not a very history-following winter, so we ended up having an underrun in our revenue. We had to dip into reserves, and this is a story you've heard before. We also suspect that the utilities are going to be hit with the same thing. They started a new way of predicting and buying energy, et cetera, et cetera. They had this, of course, the same winter to deal with, and so we expect the utilities in this next rate period may have to recover some of their mistakes, and traditionally they have to do that by putting it into the rate for the next period. So their rates may go up. That may give CPC&H a little bit more breathing room to position our rates.
Below theirs.
Perhaps we'll be able to be below theirs. We weren't able to be below theirs this last period, but we think that's partly because they were underestimating. So anyway, it will be interesting to see the new rates take effect on August 1st, and there's a little chart in here, if anybody's interested, which goes kind of a blow by blow, day by day, what happens in June. The most important things is on June 20th, Eversource has to disclose their rates, and CPC&H can react within the next day or two after that. And for Durham, what Durham has to decide is whether we're going to be able to position our default plan as the Granite Basic, or will we be able to bump our default plan up a little bit to more renewable energy, which we've done in the past. As long as our default rate is below Eversource's rate, we have permission from our council to set the default plan above the ground level plan. So the ground level plan is called Granite Basic, and it's like 25% renewable. The next level up is 33% renewable. So remains to be seen what's going to happen. But we're watching this very carefully. There were a bunch of bills that CPC&H was supporting in the legislature for basically to make progress in a more competitive, forward-looking energy market. They basically all got tabled, but they got tabled in a way that is they can be rekindled next year. And there's some effort with the Science and Technology Committee Chair, Michael Vos, who has invited CPC&H to work with him and to build a coalition of support for these next year. So hopefully some of these initiatives will come back next year.
Steve, when these were tabled, was there any rationale for it? Was it just they just said, nope, sorry, not this time around?
I didn't get any detailed explanation for them. Basically, I cut and pasted this
All right.
out of a CPC&H report, but
Paul, I saw your hand
Don't know.
up just briefly. I just want to make sure we didn't move too far away
Yeah.
from when you were.
I have a newbie question there with regards to the electricity costs. So do the Canadian tariffs, does that affect the power that comes across as well?
Canadian tariffs? That's a good question.
From hydro and
Yeah.
Well, it would be from
Yeah.
the natural gas, but technically it would.
It would.
Those tariffs currently, the Hydro-Quebec deal, it's yet to be seen if those are actually going to be imposed.
Well, there was also some
It was
question.
challenged.
That's
recently,
interesting.
Whether or
Yeah.
not Hydro-Quebec was going to continue to send certain energy to New York.
Well, yeah, and so we did see energy prices spike recently because Hydro-Quebec shut off their natural gas pipeline, but it was sourced from elsewhere. New York kind of got saved by its solar, whereas New Hampshire is looking at possibly the most expensive energy prices this summer they've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's because of Canadian actions?
Because New Hampshire really doesn't have much of a way to source additional energy during high load events outside of Canada.
And you say Canada's been reducing what they're...
Well, Hydro-Quebec turned off their natural gas pipeline a couple months ago as a because they didn't want to get overcharged while the challenges over whether or not
I
that
see.
pipeline, which is a pre-existing deal Canada and the United States have done together, right? It's not like cans of gas in a truck, right? And of course, it was not very well thought out, exactly how that would be
Okay.
dealt with.
uncertainty and chaos,
Yeah.
higher prices.
But the truth of the matter is that there isn't very much supply of energy to be sourced in New Hampshire this coming year because Massachusetts is looking to be dealing with a very energy intensive summer as well. Maine doesn't really seem to have much extra power left. Vermont never imports to New Hampshire. And New Hampshire has shut down a couple of plants in the last year as well. So we'll see
Knew the
what
timing was
happens.
going to be tough on.
Yeah,
Well, those were converting, right? They were converting to battery storage
but they're not on.
facilities? No, it takes time. It takes time.
Yeah, no, as someone who develops solar arrays over a 5-year time period, yeah, it's going to be a hot minute.
We've got about 2 minutes left. But
Yeah.
we won't set any records tonight, but I wanted to make sure you had enough time. We're happy to go a few minutes on.
I think the only other thing I'll mention is the Poverty Plains Solar Project, which is a group net metering project. Durham has already issued a statement of intent or letter of intent or
It's an
whatever.
off-taker.
And where we're going to supply the power for our water processing plant. So that's going ahead as planned, and that's basically the summary, I think, here, that we have some challenging months ahead for CPC&H. We have to kind of dig ourselves out of the hole that we dug with all of this
The credit, the change of
credits
leadership.
and so, but things are looking on the positive trajectory.
And if the utilities do come back with a new rate card that's substantially higher, it'll be a confirmation that they experimented and were not allowed to pass those costs
Right.
on, and they're no longer experimenting. So that's an interesting development. We lost legislatively, but the PUC, it seems like, recognized the most important issue. Great.
Yeah.
I'd like to just open it up for any new business. I think I was supposed to do this earlier and add it, but anybody have anything else to add before we adjourn?
I ran into Jack, and he said the EV chargers are just month over month, their utilization continues to go up. So, there's definitely appetite for more once the grant funds get unfrozen. Fingers crossed.
That's fantastic. We had 20% utilization, 50% is ideal, means there's one available.
Yeah,
I think we're at that critical point where you're
I think
starting
you said
to.
it broke 50.
Yeah, and that's the point at which you can't count on it being there when you need it and behavior starts to change. So that's a very interesting point. That's when you need an additional unit for, you know, people to
Yeah.
make rational decisions.
And I
on
don't
charging.
have much to speak on, but I'm working on some alternative methods for getting more EV chargers in the town. So once I have a better idea of that, I'll talk about it.
Fantastic. Well, 8:31, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. That was a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.